definition of coaching is helping people achieve their level of awesomeness.
I'm coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert. Coaching from the desert.
All right, all right. Welcome to another inspiring episode of Coaching from the Desert. I am Dr. Dave A. Cornelius. People call me Dr. Dave, and we're going to be exploring a powerful and timely topic, coaching for social good. Coaching offers this great, unique, human-centered approach. Some people want to call it heart-centered. I prefer human-centered to creating this sustainable transformation in individuals, organizations, and communities in a world where inequity and injustice persists. So our guest today is Hasan Rafiq, and he's a PCC, a professional certified coach, and really an accomplished change leader who integrates coaching with principles of inclusion, empathy, and equity. Hasan has worked across global enterprises and community initiatives to help individuals unlock their potential and drive meaningful change. So together, we're going to explore how coaching is not just a professional skill, but a social responsibility, a catalyst for good. Whether you're a coach, leader, or change maker, this episode will provide insight and inspiration to help you deepen your impact. So let's lean in and learn how coaching can be a force for justice, healing, and social transformation. So, Brother Hasan Rafiq, you're familiar that we always start off with
Yes.
you're going to sing a song or you're going to provide some wonderful statement or phrase that's going to inspire us to start today. Let's hear it.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity to be in the company of such amazing leaders and share perspective. As I was reflecting on my life journey, this quote stood out, and it's one of my favorites from Maya Angelou. And she says, "People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And that has stood with me for a very long time because every action, of course, has a reaction. But if we care about deeply, empathetically about people's feelings, the way you would treat people would be different. And that exploration of what that different looks like has to come from the people who are different for us to learn what does that mean. So sometimes unintentionally we do things and the impact is horrible and it causes harm. We can't sit behind assume good intent anymore. We need to calculate our impact. And the only way we can do that is by paying attention to how we are making others feel in our presence.
I love that. That is so good. And, it's one thing that I was, when I'm coaching leaders, I said, be aware of the impact of your intent,
Mhm.
right? It's something that's really important for people to take note of. So give us a 30-second elevator pitch if you choose about who you are. 30 seconds. So I'm going to time you. I want to let you know that. Or maybe Art is going to time you. Or maybe Melissa is. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, so I have been coaching for the last 16 years, personal passion for coaching, deep learner and always learning. Strongly believe in failures as that's the main source of learning. And I try to be as empathetic as I can, but still on a journey to learn how to be more empathetic towards others.
Thank you so much, friend. So what really inspired you to link coaching with social good and equity-driven transformation?
Yeah, so I feel like personal transformation and social consciousness have to coexist, which means if you want to really transform yourself inside out, you need to be conscious of your own social footprint, the impact it has, and healing happens within systems. So even if I am super aware of socially, how do I show up? What is my impact on society? I am part of a system. And I need to analyze the system itself. Does it benefit me? Does it harm me? Does it benefit others? Does it harm others? And if that is done equitably. So coaching for me became my personal way of bridging that personal empowerment with collective liberation as part of it, which is if we help one individual understand how do they show up in the world and what's their impact and the social circles they create can or in some cases do they cause harm to others unintentionally. So I do believe strongly if you want to really transform yourself into a better human being, you need to understand the social context first and link it to your place in the society and how does it impact others socially.
That's really cool. So as we're linking things, how does coaching really promote systemic change within, marginalized communities?
Yeah.
Because, that's one space that if you have money, you could
Oh,
afford a
yes.
coach. If
Yep.
you don't have
Yep.
money, coaching, you could be in a coaching desert per se,
Yeah.
literally. So
Mhm.
talk about that.
I feel coaching creates the internal capacity for external advocacy. Since the coaching profession started, we all know this is for the elite, like the C-suite only. So access to coaching is only for few. One of the ways we can shift that is by democratizing the coaching for everyone. And especially if you are a large organization, you need to analyze the data who's getting the coaching. And that data can easily be sliced by gender, race, ethnicity to understand who's benefiting from the coaching the most and who are we offering coaching the most. So, in one way, you can democratize coaching for everyone. In another way, you can also look at historically the gatekeeping of coaching and how did that create some of the challenges that we see now. How do we counteract that? Because if you empower one person from an underrepresented community, it becomes a catalyst for a family, it becomes a catalyst for community transformation as well. So first and foremost is access for everyone, and especially analyzing access for underrepresented, the impact of that access on the larger community, and then shifting that to coaching is for everyone. Here is how it can be offered for multiple different versions of it for different audiences.
So give an example
Yeah,
where coaching created like a measurable social
yeah,
impact.
yeah.
Because oftentimes it's great to say coaching is for
Hmm.
everyone, but where has it taken place?
Yeah,
And maybe even look into the future, where can it take place
yeah.
as another opportunity?
So I'll give you one example. I was working with the first generation college students through a leadership coaching program. And within 2 years, 80% of them started their own mentorship initiative on their own campus.
Mm.
Three of them launched a nonprofit that looked at food insecurity within their own geography. And ultimately, they brought what they learned from that work into their own organization from a student support services as well. So the ripple effect of empowering one individual, as I said before, has an impact on society. But that could only happen if they had access to coaching. Someone helped them think through the impact they can have. Someone enabled and empowered them to think bigger and challenge their own thinking. From a future perspective, I do feel this is institutional. So, as I said before, we can measure the impact of coaching like we do for executives, for C suite. How did we help a C suite executive become more successful? We can do exactly the same when we look at people who don't have access to coaching. We just need to be brave enough to offer the coaching, skilled enough to understand that coaching will show up differently for this audience because of access barriers and so on, and then enabling them to understand the impact it can have, which is scaled impact versus an individual impact. That I feel is still missing in today's conversation and the future conversation, because we need to scale coaching for everyone, which right now still I feel is tied to maybe corporate C-suite, director level, manager level, but very few organizations go down the path of let's offer it to our ICs too.
Interesting. Any questions from my audience while we're here? A quick question that you may have. If not, that's okay. We'll just keep going. I'll keep leading the conversation.
Oh my gosh, there's so much that's running through my mind about all of this. But you're just asking for one quick question.
Just
So
one question. Yeah, that's it.
um, I don't know if I can come up with one quick. I
Take your
love
time.
I love what you're talking about. Let's keep going, and I'll keep thinking about it. I'll think about how to reduce this down into simple questions for you.
Not a
But,
problem.
okay.
So Hassan, as you're approaching culture, I want to know, how do you approach cultural humility and empathy in your coaching practice? Because, and I was just listening to something today or reading something today, in terms of how we show up
Hmm.
in communities who we're trying to help,
Yeah.
right? And then oftentimes we come in there on our white horses trying to solve a
Hmm.
problem, and we're not humble. It's kind of like
Yeah.
we have all the answers. So give me an
Yeah.
example of how do you tackle that in your approach?
I think the first major shock I had was 10 years ago when I was coaching someone in Saudi Arabia, and I kept on following the coach's guide to ask powerful questions to generate insights. And it went nowhere
Hmm.
because of the lack of understanding of what coaching is. But coaching in itself as a profession is Western in its context. It builds individual accountability versus community accountability, which two-thirds of the world is community accountability. It focuses on directness and pointedness to come straight to the point to ask the question that will shake someone and help them think through and generate that insight. So one third of the world is that. Of course, in the US, in the Western part of the world, critical reasoning, direct questions, individual accountability are the frameworks to follow. That may not be true in another part of the world. So my coaching needs to be informed by someone else from that cultural context, which means I need to be humble enough and curious enough to not go in with the assumptions or the framework of coaching, which is ask powerful questions, generate insights, build chemistry with your client. Building chemistry with your client does mean, in my context, 2 to 3 months versus the 1 or 2 sessions. I need to earn their trust versus assume the trust they understand what a coach is supposed to do. So, what I try to do is be culturally humble enough to enable the curiosity for my client to teach me their cultural context instead of making those assumptions. I also try and regularly examine my own bias and privilege because, like I said in the beginning, we're a social construct, and I have a position in society. How am I informing my own privilege and the biases that I carry? And that means, again, fumbling in a coaching conversation and learning from your client and getting informed by them how do they operate in their communities. So that's one aspect of it. Another very good technique is we need to analyze our own circle of coaches, and that I do also every 6 months is to analyze how much diverse coaches do I have in my own circle, because they are going to inform me, they are going to teach me, they are going to let me understand the context that they operate in. So if you are a coach, the first thing you can do is my top 10 people, how diverse are they? And it can be race, ethnicity, gender, whatever it is. We need to circulate that so that we get educated from other coaches on how do they coach in different cultural contexts, and also continue to build our awareness and challenge our own blind spots because we all have them.
And that's so true. And, just looking at the self-awareness that's
Hmm.
required, right? As we're trying to help to bring around equity and justice, belonging, healing,
Hmm.
all of those aspects. Um, how much self-awareness do you need, and how do you build that up? Right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's a tough thing to do, to,
yeah,
to be reflective of who you are and how you could make a difference. Sorry if I made this question
yeah.
really tough, but it's fun.
I think self awareness is foundational. That's the birthplace. If you haven't gone through your own personal transformation, how can you expect to take someone else on that journey? It's so easy. We put it all on the coaches to say, you're the personal transformation expert. We are going to give you a client and just transform this individual. The coach also is a human being and they have to go through their own transformation, have their own failures and learnings from it. This also reminds me of of another client I had who was going from US to an Asian country, and he asked me, "So how do I build my self-awareness? I have read these many books, and you know what? I have traveled the world. I have traveled to 85 countries, and I have a lot of cultural intelligence built into how I operate. So this is not new to me." And I said, "Share with me an example of what those 85 countries travel looks like." And because he's a senior executive, flies into, for example, Manila, stays in a five-star hotel, does all the meetings, 2 days, visits the office, and back to the US. And I said, think about it. You're just ticking the box that you visited Philippines. For you to get the awareness, I want you to stay in Philippines for 6 months, live in a neighborhood which is dominated by the majority, which is Filipinos, eat their food, buy groceries from their store, navigate the traffic, and after 6 months, you will be a different person.
Hmm.
Because the 6 months you'll get so frustrated that you'll have either a choice, I want to exit, or you will say, well, why is this different? Why do they do it differently? You'll become curious and you'll start to learn their ways of living, working, operating, which is an enhancement from your own perspective on your cultural competence. So I do feel self-awareness is foundational, but reading books, watching movies, or ticking the box for traveling countries is not going to help us. What is going to help us is the experiences that we intentionally create by living and operating in those environments, which I think, again, as I said, is going to be a luxury. Not everyone has the opportunity to go and live in another, but we can still create those experiences if we really want to transform. The other aspect of it is also us as human beings. And again, for equity work, this means understanding my own relationship with power, privilege, and systemic oppression, which is a very hard thing to do because your inward focus. You will start to look for one of the exercises that I do with coaches is to build your own personal inclusion narrative. And sometimes some of the coaches struggle by saying, well, you're asking me to find exclusionary experiences from childhood. I can't find one. I didn't have one. And if you think about it, think about the privilege that you're carrying with it. Because another coach from a different background has listed 11 exclusionary experiences. There is a difference in your experience and their experience. And of course, this is not to shame you, but this is to understand your relationship with privilege and power and how you were blessed in certain ways where others were not. That self awareness also shifts the conversation. Because I don't believe in shaming people into compliance. That doesn't never work.
Yeah.
What works is, are you aware? And in some cases, switching on the spotlight in a dark place to say, did you see this? And now that you see it, what are you going to do about it? And that starts the whole conversation of why does this difference exist? And my role in society, am I promoting this difference or am I causing harm unintentionally without being aware? How do I take personal responsibility and shift the conversation?
That's really interesting because I run into coaches who have said that I could coach anyone from any culture, and I laugh about that because anyway, I wouldn't even get on that. I'm not getting on that soapbox.
Yeah.
But I ran into people who are like say that, and I'm going like, really?
Mhm.
Okay. But anyway, let's talk about building trust in cross-cultural and high-stakes environment.
Yeah.
How do we do that? How does that work?
I think it's part of it is we do that, part of it is we open ourselves to it. So
Mm,
the way I see it is it's you can look at trust as competence based or earned trust. And earned trust is which I focus on is 2/3 of the world. They focus more on you need to give me a reason to trust you versus competence wise, you're the best person for the job I hire you. It's a consistent demonstration of cultural competence as well as genuine care. I need to spend the time to understand the historical context through which this client is approaching me and the communities that I serve and the communities that they serve. So, transparency about my own limitations is the first conversation, which means I don't know about this. I don't know about the cultural context. I need your help, which means as a coach in this coaching relationship, I need to be vulnerable enough to give my client an understanding of where I'm really good at and here are my limitations. And then you open yourself up so that they can educate you, they can help you. Your client helps and informs the thinking as to how they approach the coaching relationship and so on. But it's I feel like it's a constant ongoing process that you have to go through with a client, especially in high stakes situations where you need to earn their trust in every interaction that you have with them. So you start to see they open up. And that is also true from a cultural competence perspective. In the Western world, I understand what coaching is, why I get a coach. Here is everything on the table. Here's what it, with some exceptions. But more so in other contexts, it is here is the little bit that I'm going to give you, and let's see what you do with that information. And I'm going to test you with that information. And then I'll give you a little bit more and test you again. And till the time I feel that you have earned my trust, here is everything. And those are two different conversations, two different approaches that you need to engage with the client, two different distinct ways of building chemistry with your client.
That's wonderful, my friend. So, how do we, what advice would you give other coaches? I know you teach other coaches, right? And so they could get the wonderful ICF certification. So, what advice would you give aspiring coaches who really want to create social impact?
Yeah. I think it starts with, and this may be the third time you're talking about it, is self-awareness and self-education. Deep personal work is required for this. If you really want to have social impact, it may also mean that you're uncomfortable for a while, and that's okay. Being uncomfortable is the place of growth. That's how we all grow. That's how we have grown, and that's how we will continue to grow. So, the first would be your relationship in the social context is more important than who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters more is the role that you play in society. And are you super aware of the role that you play in the society, the privilege and the power that we have, and the impact of that? Going back to your earlier point, we need to calculate our impact. And if we are not able to calculate our impact, we may be causing unintentional harm, which we didn't set out to cause. So there is an internal dialogue as well as opening ourselves up for internal reconstruction so that we can learn socially what impact we are having. The second part is also organizational and societal. How many organizations are focused on building pipelines of diverse coaches? Because that's a missing link as well. If we don't have representation in the coaching pool overall, we are missing on a huge opportunity of learning and growth as a foundation, as an organization, whatever it is, because we are not creating that space for us to be informed as coaches by other coaches who are doing this differently. And that is more global in its context because still many of the coaches are sitting in the Western part of the world. And the best practices that we implement globally are Western in their context. So again, as a coaching profession, we need to challenge ourselves. How many of our practices were born maybe outside of US and Europe? And are they successful when it comes to coaching? How are they successful? What can we learn from it? And then if you want to focus on the authentic relationships, that does mean serving the communities that are underrepresented, which each of the diverse coaches can also do, but it's not the responsibility just of the diverse coaches. It's every coach's responsibility to say which communities do I serve the most. And again, like I said, from your internal circle of coaches, am I serving diverse communities or not? And if not, what can I do in that space?
That's so good. That's so good. So, um, I'm going to throw the question out there again to Melissa and Art Jones. We have about, let's call it 10 minutes. Um, Anything that you guys are curious about, or even comments that you would like to add to the conversation before I close? You're on. Okay, you go.
I'll jump in, and I think it's the idea, social constructivism. When I live in a community, my ideas are not the download one-to-one. I'm a product of the community that I'm from. I live in Tucson, Arizona right now. So there are influences here in the old Pueblo, and looking at the background that Dr. Dave has, That's different from where I grew up in New Jersey. I'm shaped by New Jersey. I'm shaped by Southern California, Orange County. And now I'm being shaped again by Tucson, Arizona. When I acknowledge those things, that's the scope. I've traveled places in the world, but to Hasan's point, I've not lived in any of those places in the world longer than 4 weeks at a time. So social constructivism and trying to call myself socially aware, I'm intellectually socially aware. I'm not by experience socially aware. And social constructivism, when we learn from the community, and I'll quote this, the Zulu in Swahili, they have a word, it's Ubuntu. Mm-hmm. And Ubuntu, culturally for them, it means I am because we are. That's social constructivism in the Zulu society. In New Jersey, I said hi to everybody. And there was a community in the neighborhood, so to speak. But so this is really, I don't have a question as much as that's a comment. I don't know, how to build on that, but it did bring that to mind as something that I have to be aware of more. My self-awareness is largely intellectual. It's about me in this form that I have and the work that I've done to gain the wisdom about my own values and beliefs and biases. But when I get outside of that, I'd like to say that the more socially aware I am, the better I can understand other people. That's a mantra. That's not a reality. Just because I know myself, Lao Tzu said, knowing yourself is, knowing other people is strength, knowing yourself is wisdom. It'd be great to have wisdom about the communities of people that are culturally different than I am, so I can serve them better. And I won't even go to the next level, which is who's building the AI. So if I want to talk about the colonization of coaching, who's building the AI? Because the democratization of coaching is not going to happen because there's more than 60,000 coaches that are ordained in the next 12 months. There's going to be 1 billion copies of Microsoft Copilot that will be coaching people that will be built by. So the complexification of the challenge only grows as we go forward. So
that's another conversation. And you and I had this conversation on this podcast. So I'm going to say we're not going to talk about AI right now. We're going to talk about social good. And if we could, I'm just putting a box around the conversation, if that's okay. Melissa, you got, you coming back to us now?
Hello. Wow, I'm just in awe of you guys and the things that you've all shared and said. Hasan, thank you for the topic. I'm an introvert, so I have to think about things a little bit before I come up with good questions. So probably this time tomorrow, I'll have a list of things I want to ask you, Hasan.
Anytime.
But I just want to say that I have been living in foreign countries. I'm from the States, and I've been living in foreign countries now for almost 8 years. And everything that you said is right on. It's extremely difficult. It's the hardest thing that I've ever done. And I have not had an easy life. But it's been one of the hardest things that I've ever had to keep persevering through, is to try to show up as who I am and be true to myself, but also, like you say, humble and be willing to just try to understand the different cultures and ways of being and perspectives in order to try to I've learned here, I'm in Belize right now. I've been here for several years, and I've learned to just focus the work that I do here, which is all pro bono, by the way, focus it on just helping to relieve suffering. I've learned to just narrow everything that I can do down to that one simple little thing. Mm-hmm. Because anything more than that comes across as offensive and arrogant, especially from a white woman, which is the most hated entity down here. So it's been a massive learning experience. And I'm really grateful to hear you say the things that you shared today in validation and reminders.
Well,
Great. Thank you so
excellent.
much.
We have about 4 minutes. I don't know if Hasan, you want to throw something else in there for the time that we do have.
I've been thinking about this for a while now, but if maybe this is a question, and maybe it's not a question, it's a conversation on how do we build coaches of the future? And of course, AI is part of it, but I'm talking more so from the representation perspective of up to a certain level, AI can coach us. Yes, it can. But the real transformation happens when you are with someone and you see their wheels turn. AI will take about 5 to 10 years to get there, you, just assuming. But how do we build the next wave of coaches that is representative of the populations that we serve?
Yeah, that's a great
That is a very
question.
good question. And
Yeah,
and I know that because we live in a first world, well, some of us do right now live in a first world, we think about things that AI will have this prominent, posture, which it may not, because let's say that first world countries with access to technology is about 20 to 30%. Well, what about the other 70% who
Yeah.
doesn't have access to
Yeah.
in that way and have the type of powerful tools to be able to,
Plus,
so
also, they
that's what
will
I'm just
have
plugging. Go
the
ahead.
other 70% of the world will have low trust on the tools built in the Western part of the
That's
world.
right.
So they will have their own. And that's also where the opportunity is to why did they build it differently? And that's learning as well.
Yeah. I want to build on that because when I thought of social constructivism, it was after Hasan mentioned the workshop that he did where people went through the process and then they went and did the process again. They iterated. They said, I learned this by being coached. Now I'm going to build something that goes and serves somebody else. They paid it forward. And I know that there are a lot of people that are working on, and this is an AI construct, to bring to high school students that usually there's a school of 3,000 people, and there's 3 counselors in that school, so 1 to 1,000. So you don't get very good counseling because you don't get much access. So they're deploying AI to the students that can then go home and at their convenience have a conversation with something that's inanimate, but it's guiding them toward the next phase of their life and giving them a way to navigate that. If we insert humans into those processes more than we insert AI at a young age, then those young people will learn the value of coaching and say, well, when I was 14, I had a coach and it helped me define what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And now here I am. I'm not going to use AI then because now I know the power of heart-centered coaching and I'm going to learn the skills. So we have to give them the democratization of coaching can insert the value of coaching into the marketplace. And I'm the perfect example. 3 years ago, I was in Armored. I'm a technologist, so I love tech. So I was in love with AI coaching. The more I got engaged year over year, by 24, 28 months in, I had turned myself into a heart-centered coach, much more than I was 3 years prior, because I saw on balance the value of what we as coaches do with lived experience that AI cannot do. So
Most certainly. So anything else, Hasan, you want to leave us with before I close?
I think it's a question for all the listeners. How are we checking ourselves? How are we anticipating our impact? How are we building our diverse networks? And if there is one key takeaway, let's go ahead and do all of that and make our networks more diverse.
Most definitely. That's why I hang out with folks like you and Art. And now we have Melissa. That's why I hang out with a diverse group of people always. Hey, so thank you for joining us for this episode of Coaching from the Desert. I want to thank Hasan Rafiq for his wisdom, compassion, and commitment to coaching for social good. Today's conversation reminded us that coaching isn't just about individual development, right? There's collective healing and progress. We learned that when coaching is rooted in empathy, humility, and equity, it can transform organization, even society at large. And I just want to say, like, if you're inspired to take action, consider how your coaching or leadership practices can serve a greater purpose. So think about how you could hold space for others, how you could listen deeply and catalyze systemic change. I just want us to keep reflecting, keep growing, and most importantly, keep contributing to a more inclusive and just world. And I'll say until next time, this is Dr. Dave, reminding you to listen with intention, lead with heart, as Art said, heart centered, and coach with a vision for a better tomorrow. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and for Melissa and Art for joining us today. I really appreciate your voices and just the insights that you have contributed to this conversation today.
Thank you.
My definition of coaching is helping people achieve their level of awesomeness.
I'm coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert.
Coaching from the desert.
From the desert.
Coaching from the desert.